million people in the UK have an eating disorder. A quarter of those are men. Well, the former England cricketer Freddie Flintoff has recently discussed his own challenges with bulimia as part of a BBC documentary. Let's take a look.
This is such a hard thing to define or even admit. For years I've managed to keep it hidden. It's not right, is it? I know it's not right.
By speaking openly about his bulimia, Freddie Flintoff has helped to dispel some of the stigma around the mental health condition that notoriously thrives on secrecy. One person who knows all about this is Tommy Kelly, who joins us via Skype. Tommy, how did you feel when you watched the documentary?
Well, for me, I thought it was really, really important that somebody like Freddie, who for all intents and purposes looks as if he's got everything great in his life, because people look up to celebrities, so I really felt it was a different insight to somebody that was struggling, yet they feel as if they look as if their life's really, really good. So people like him speaking out about things, I think it really makes people come forward and understand that it's not really a female illness, because that's the kind of stigma and perception that a lot of people seem to surround with, especially eating disorders.
And were there things that Freddie talked about that you recognised in yourself?
Absolutely, especially when he talked about that he kind of puts on this front when he's in like a certain amount of people and things like that, yet he's a different person when he's in the kind of backdrop and things. So I feel that was kind of what I was suffering with. I used to put on a brave face, yet I would be struggling in the background and I would be too afraid to speak about things because obviously the stigma that surrounds eating disorders as well.
And Tommy, tell us a little bit about your own challenges with eating disorders.
Well, my eating disorder originally started in 1997 with the loss of my mum. She had suffered long-term cancers over 17 years. And at that point, I was a semi-professional footballer playing with Scotland under-16s. And I basically thought I was getting a lot fitter. I didn't really understand what was going on. I thought I was cutting down on my food and things like that. Over the next 3 years, up until the year 2000, I was constantly losing weight. Things were getting worse and worse. I was making myself vomit and things like that as well. I was just feeling really terrible at myself. I was looking at myself in the mirror and seeing somebody totally different to what everybody else seen. And I was blaming myself about my mum's passing as well. And then over the years, I got a lot better. After that first time, I would maybe went up to set point weight. Things seemed to be getting really better. I went back to work, obviously met my wife. Think my life was really going really, really well. And then we got married. And then she suffered 4 miscarriages, which was misdiagnosed as polycystic ovarian syndrome. It turned out it was ovarian cancer and she needed a full hysterectomy. And at that point, I relapsed and suffered another heart attack as well. Then my dad was really, really ill with type 1 diabetes, and that was the last relapse that I actually had. And when I went into hospital at that point, something just clicked within me, and I realised I had to get myself better, even though I'd tried all through my life to do that. It's something that this time just really, really worked. And then I'm the best I've ever been since then. But I just wish I had done it years and years before and not wasted all those years of my life. But I think sometimes you've just got to go round and around about to actually get to that place of full recovery.
Tommy, you've been through a huge amount of trauma, which I think anyone would have struggled to cope with. But do you think it was the control that you had over food and exercise at the time that was something that you used to cope?
Definitely, because I think as well there's a kind of perfectionist side of people that's in like kind of the sporting kind of side of things, and me being a footballer, I think that was part of it as well. Obviously there's a genetic predisposed position to eating disorders as well, but for me I think it was a bit kind of numbing myself for the pain in a way, because it's like you're escaping from the world and you're just trying to like numb yourself from it, and it's like a coping mechanism, because a lot of people think that eating disorders are about food and body image, where it's not about that. It's about the problems that's going on in your life, and that can be for myself like grief, other people it's abuse, bullying, it can be anything, and it's just a way to cope with that and kind of numb yourself from the pain as well.
So how did you feel when you actually got a diagnosis?
It was a massive relief, and the thing that really got me, it was an actual female doctor that actually noticed it. And for me, I've kind of noticed over the years that female doctors seem to notice these things in men a lot more than the male doctors do. I don't know actually why, because like I say, the part of the biggest thing is obviously speaking about your eating disorder and obviously getting help, but for somebody to actually realise that, because I'd had it for maybe about 2 years after knowing that I had an eating disorder, and for somebody to actually see that I had an eating disorder, it kind of let me know that I can open up about it and I can actually get help.
And what advice would you give to anyone who is struggling, particularly for men who might find it harder to speak up?
I think the really important thing is trying to speak to somebody you can trust. That can be a family member or a friend, but there's great resources on BeatEat and things like that. You can obviously go on and speak onto their peer support groups. You can even do that anonymously, and they'll signpost you to services in your area as well. Because I think the biggest part of it is obviously speaking about it and kind of taking back the secrecy that the eating disorder actually has. And the earlier you can actually speak about things, the more likely you are to obviously get the help you need and obviously have a sustained and healthy recovery, which is really, really important. The earlier you can actually do it.
Well, Tommy, it's been really enlightening talking to you on the Good Health Show. Thank you so much for joining us. And really moving to hear a lot of what Tommy was talking about. I mean, he clearly went through a lot and has struggled with it for many years. He talked about looking for help in the past and finding that for him, a female GP was more sympathetic, whereas he found the male doctors a bit more dismissive. Do you think there still is a stigma about which gender eating disorders really affect?
I think there is, and I think I must say as well that I think both Tommy and Freddie Flintoff have done everybody, male and female, doctors and patients, such a service by speaking out and shining a light. Tommy was wearing the T-shirt of BeatEat, a really good eating disorders charity, which I would urge anybody who has worries about themselves or someone else to look at for more details about diagnosis and symptoms and how to get help. And in answer to your question, yes, I think there has been a certain gender blindness and actually skewed against men in the past. So I think possibly because women often have issues themselves with food so often. Maybe female GPs have very often, being women themselves, had food issues, and then maybe they're more receptive to talking about it both with men and women. Who knows? It might just be that he was lucky to find someone he could talk to. But I think the fact that around 1 in 4 now of people who are being diagnosed with bulimia are men really does kind of make us realise how it is something that crosses gender divide.
And as you say, brilliant that they're both speaking out about this. Eating disorders of all forms can be something to do with control, as Tommy mentioned there. As a doctor, is it presenting itself in a different way or more during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, that is such an interesting question. And I think, yes, I think it has changed it. I mean, bulimia and eating disorders are not just about food, of course. As you say, they're about control. Tommy mentioned that there's a genetic element. It can be societal pressures or personal pressures to be the best or to be a certain way. Of course, social media often doesn't help, but on the other hand, social media can also provide tools like access to BeatEat, which can be helpful. So it's a double-edged sword there. But in terms of COVID and how it's presented, I think on the one hand, some people who are on perhaps the cusp of an eating disorder might have been triggered into one, because people often feel they can be in control if they can control what food they buy, how they eat, whether they go to the gym, how they exercise. Of course, during lockdown, so many of those factors were limited. We lost control to so many of those things, and that would have had a negative impact. If people were self-isolating and feeling socially isolated, that would have kind of ramped it up as well. But on the other side, I've also seen people who've come forward for the very first time since the COVID crisis. And the reasons are that perhaps they've been living with a flatmate who's noticed some of the behaviours, some of the binge eating, some of the purging with laxatives or vomiting, or just some of the conversations around self-esteem and difficult relationship with food. And perhaps in those long evenings when we've been locked in, if we're lucky enough, say, to have a flatmate who's, good listener, perhaps people have also been encouraged to address their issues and come forward. So I think a mixed bag.
Great advice there. Thank you very much, Anne. And of course, if you're affected by anything we talked about and you'd like to find out more information about eating disorders, and the BeatEat website has all the information you need.